Welcome to Two Way Tonight. As we come on the air, I love that TV phrase. As we come on the air, lots going on in Washington. The story we've been covering in the morning meeting, and here, the question of how Speaker Johnson is going to pull a rabbit out of a hat and keep the government from shutting down in a few hours, really. Depends on how you define a few hours. And there have been major developments, which I will run you through in just a moment as best I can. The major developments will may be occurring fast and furious while we're on the air here talking. So please stand by for news, information, and updates at a rat-a-tat-tat basis. We're also going to talk tonight about one of the most important issues in the country, which is governance of our cities. I have long said that the only thing more shocking and outrageous to me than the failed governance of generations of Democratic leaders in our cities is the failure of conservatives to offer a compelling enough vision to allow there to be a different kind of governance, to try something new so the people who live in our urban areas can have safe streets and economic opportunity and great schools. Very few people in the country, very few organizations have thought about this in a systematic way. Three folks from the Manhattan Institute are here to talk about what happened in the election regarding the cities and what might happen in the future. The Manhattan Institute is one of the best places in the country thinking about these issues, eager to hear from them as well. So we'll do both those things. As always, we welcome your participation. If you're watching on YouTube, tens of thousands of you are, great. Happy to have you here to watch the proceedings unfurl in front of you. If you're motivated by peace, love, and understanding, and you want to go in the chat and write something nice or even challenging, but not potty-mouthed, please do. But don't write anything in the chat that's crap. I don't read the chat. Some of you have heard me say that. I hear from my colleagues the chat's gotten less potty-mouthed of late. Christmas miracle, perhaps. Keep it up. And if you're here on the two-way platform, welcome and thank you for joining. Love having you here. We'd love to have you be part of the conversation. Please raise your electronic hand to get in on the conversation. Love having new people. Every week, we love when there are people who say those magical words, first time, long time, from my youth. Love that. And we love the returning people. So please get in line, raise your hand. We'd love to have you be part of the conversation. All right. Not much news in the world of politics except all this stuff going on in Washington. So as the day unfolded, Speaker Johnson had lots of meetings, people coming and going from his office, and they came up with a solution. Reported middle of the afternoon that it's going to be a bill that funds the government through March, has disaster relief funding in it, has raised the debt ceiling for a couple years, and a few other things. But a very different bill than the one that was on a path to failure, and one that quickly, it became clear, was supported by President Trump. Put up the Trump statement, please. As far as I know, we don't know that Trump's boss, Elon Musk, that's a joke, Prime Minister Musk, if he's for it or not, but I suspect he will be. But Donald Trump, shortly after news broke about this deal, put out this statement, very bullish on the agreement. Success, all caps in Washington, exclamation point. Speaker Johnson and the House have come to a very good deal. J.D. Vance would never capitalize deal. For the American people, also wouldn't do that on people. The newly agreed to American Relief Act of 2024 will keep the government open, fund our great farmers and others, and provide relief for those severely impacted by the devastating hurricane. So it also has farmer money in there, which is Donald Trump's obsession, even though he's not running for re-election. A very important piece, vital to the American First agenda, was added as well. The date of the very unnecessary debt ceiling will be pushed out 2 years to January 30th, 2027. Now we can make America great again very quickly, which is what the people gave us a mandate to accomplish. All Republicans and even the Democrats should do what is best for our country and vote yes for this bill tonight. So indeed, there are going to be votes tonight. In fact, there's one probably taking place this hour. You can take that tweet down. The challenge is to get 218 votes, right? So there's two ways to have votes in the House. You can have suspension of the rules that requires 2/3 vote to pass, or you can have regular order and a rule passed out of the Rules Committee that requires a simple majority. Is there enough support in the House for this bill to pass? Either way, right? Speaker Johnson doesn't care which way it passes. We still don't really know if the Senate will pass this bill or not, but that's a discussion for another day. So what's happening now is they're about to vote on with the suspension of the rules 2/3. It's not going to get 2/3. If you looked at this deal in the abstract, you'd say Democrats might be for it. It might be lots of Democrats be for it. In fact, they're not. Speaker or leader Hakeem Jeffries said, hell no, he's not voting for this, urging Democrats not to. Some might. And in fact, if some don't, it's not going to pass. It's not going to get 2/3. The reason they're having this vote under the suspension is they want to basically do a live fire whip count. They want to figure out who's going to be for this bill, particularly on the Republican side and maybe on the Democratic side. If it's to pass, it's going to pass in a second vote, if they do the second vote, with mostly Republicans, but replacing the necessary number of Republicans with a few Democrats who defied the Democratic leadership and vote yes. If this deal were in the abstract, if it weren't all the stuff around it, including the Democrats' anger that the previous deal, which they liked a lot more, was scuttled, a lot of Democrats would be for this for a variety of reasons. But they're not, because their deal was scuttled, because they don't want to bail out Johnson and Trump, and because if MAGA's for it, they're against it. Is MAGA for it? A lot of MAGA is. Please put up the other tweet. This image has been tweeted and retweeted by lots of MAGA people throughout the afternoon. It's a picture of the original bill that MAGA opposed and Musk and Trump held killed next to this bill. And this symbolism is just huge for MAGA, right? We took a monstrosity on the left and we replaced it with a tiny little itty bitty piece of MAGA magic. Not everybody for MAGA is for it. Already, some Republicans have said they're against this for a variety of reasons, mostly on the right, mostly the kind of people who oppose any spending deal, and particularly raising the debt ceiling. If this passes, and I'll talk in a second about whether I think it will, it's a huge win for Trump and Musk because they took a bill that MAGA opposed and they opposed, and they got something different. And raising the debt ceiling well before the deadlines never happened in my career. That gets it off the table for Trump next year and Republicans and avoids that being tied up with the two reconciliation bills they want to do. It'd just be a huge thing for them if they got this passed. Will it pass? And then again, leaving the Senate aside, right now I don't think so. I don't think it will because I think Democrats are going to be lockstep against it, and I think some Republicans, enough Republicans, will oppose it. And of course, as you know, the majority is so slim that it's difficult to pass anything without full Republican support. But I don't rule it out because there's going to be just a very few number of Republicans who have to vote against it. Very few they'll need to convince. In other words, I think the vast majority of Republicans will be for it. Johnson's for it. MAGA's for it. And it's a mistake to think of Johnson as a MAGA speaker. He's a religious conservative from the South who's made nice with MAGA, but he's really not like kind of pure MAGA. And the deal he made that got scuttled, not only did MAGA oppose it, but no one true MAGA would put a pay raise for Congress in a must-pass bill. That's just out of touch with the MAGA sensibility. If it passes, okay, Trump will be for it, obviously. Again, I assume Musk will be. And it will be a big victory, and it will be a huge turnaround. One of the biggest mistakes made in coverage of Congress all the time, is the press announces, because the leaders announce, we have a deal. We have a deal. And in this case, Trump endorsed the deal. And you say, well, of course it's going to pass now. They have a deal. Why are they announcing a deal if it's not a done deal? And the answer is because sometimes they have to take a little bit of a risk and put something out there and see how it goes. I'm not shocked at all that Hakeem Jeffries is against it for all the reasons I said. But I wonder if when they announced the deal, they had a strategy to get 218 votes. And I still wonder that. I heard all day from people who listened to me on the morning meeting who said, you don't get it. This isn't about the old rules and they're just blowing things up and then they'll figure it out. This is not like a normal way of governing and that's what people voted for and that's how this is going to go. And I don't disagree with that. But being against the status quo and being for blowing things up doesn't remove your obligation to actually have a plan. You still can have a plan. They're not incompatible. And I don't know if they have a plan to get 218 votes. It doesn't seem to me like they do. I wonder if they thought or asked Hakeem Jeffries, might he be for it? It's possible because of how tribal everything is that they couldn't even ask him. Because if they asked him, then they're basically saying, we want your blessing for this. And because of how tribal and zero-sum everything is, if a word got out in MAGA that they sought the blessing of Hakeem Jeffries, it's a bad bill. It's no longer a MAGA bill if they wanted his support. But I would say as of now, I don't think it's going to pass. I don't think it's zero chance. And like I said, I think most Republicans will be for it. So we'll have a vote. It'll fall far short of 2/3, I think. And then the question will be, Can they replace the necessary number of Republicans they lose on the regular? Well, first the question will be, can they get it out of the Rules Committee? Because as most of you know, because you're students of all of this and you have PhDs in Schoolhouse Rock, they had to put three MAGA, what we call extreme MAGA, three MAGA folks on the Rules Committee, and they'll have to vote to let the thing go to the floor. If they get it out of the Rules Committee and they put it on the floor, then can they get enough Democrats to replace the Republicans they lose? And can they whip Republicans in it? Tim Burchett of Tennessee is an incredibly MAGA hardliner on spending. And I don't say hardliner in a negative way. He cares a lot about spending, doesn't like raising the debt ceiling. I heard him do an interview about an hour ago in which he trashed the thing. They're not giving him enough time to read it. It was cooked up in a back room, da da da. But then he said he might vote for it because Donald Trump's for it, and that carries a lot of weight where he's from. So if Burchett is open to voting for it, then I think the thing could pass. Like I said, I don't see the votes right now. And if it goes down, I don't know what they'll do. And as I said, even if they get it out of rules and even if they get it off the floor and vote it, I'm not sure the Senate's going to pass it. So a long way to go. We still have a shutdown. The other thing I wonder is if Republicans have a PR plan if there is a shutdown. Talked this morning about how Newt Gingrich is one of the few Republicans who says, shut down, bring it on. We can win this fight. He says, we got a historic majority in 94 after a shutdown. But you need a plan for a shutdown. And as I said, you can be for jihad politics in a shutdown and shake things up and do things in a different way, but that doesn't preclude the need to have a plan. There are ways to win that fight, but I wonder if they've had discussions about it because the press will blame the shutdown on the Republicans. The president of the United States, I don't mean Donald Trump, I mean Joe Biden, still not involved in this as far as we know. The vice president, who we reported this morning was supposed to fly to LA at 9 tonight, she's canceled that. I think she needs to be here because her vote might be needed in the Senate one way or the other, and wouldn't look great to have her flying across the country while this potential shutdown was taking place. So that's where that stands. Happy to take your questions about it when we go to your questions, and my colleagues will keep us honest on any news that develops on that front during the program. So let's switch gears to talk about a topic of great interest to me, which is our cities, and particularly the politics of our cities, both the electoral politics of our city and the governance of our cities. And if my colleagues could help me out and bring in the three folks from the Manhattan Institute, that would be fantastic. As I said, if you're not familiar with the Manhattan Institute, it's a New York-based organization that does a lot of scholarship, a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions about politics, urban politics, and about center-right politics and reform of the parts of the status quo that aren't serving the American people well. And I'm a huge fan of their scholarship, and I'm a huge fan of their belief in scholarship and service of making the country better. So I'm waiting for all three to come in, but while we do, one at a time, Renu, that's how I pronounce your first name, right?
Yes.
Welcome in. How do you pronounce your last name?
Mukherjee.
Mukherjee. I'm horrible at pronunciation. You know the state where Las Vegas is?
Yes.
How do you pronounce that state? Do you know?
Nevada.
Nevada, like Vlad, Nevada. I'm horrible at pronouncing that. Thank you for joining. Tell people if I screwed up in describing the Manhattan Institute, or did I
No,
get it
you
right?
described it perfectly, and I'm also very impressed that you got my first name correct on the first try.
Somebody told me how to do it. All right. Raphael, is that how you pronounce your first name?
You got it.
All right. And how about your last name?
Mangual.
Mangual. All right. Again,
Perfect.
please don't take offense. I can't pronounce anything.
None taken.
I can pronounce Daniel DiMartino just because it's phonetic. Welcome to all three of you. I'd love to go around and just have you describe what's your area of specialty, what's your area of scholarship, what do you write about, and if people are interested in your work, where they can find you. Okay. Renu, you first, please.
Sure, thanks, Mark. So I study two topics that are broadly related. The first being affirmative action or racial preferences in both higher education and K through 12 schools, broadly described as the racial aspect of DEI. And then the second topic I do a lot of work in at the Manhattan Institute is Asian American political behavior.
Okay, great. Daniel.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I study immigration, both academically and in my PhD in economics at Columbia and also at the Manhattan Institute. So everything from high skilled immigration, the border, and all related.
Okay. And Rafael?
So I mostly focus on criminal justice issues, policing, crime, incarceration, and all of the surrounding debates, particularly, how race and justice play into each other.
Okay. I want to talk about the election, but I want to ask a Trump question, and I'm just going to throw it at whoever wants to jump in can. Press your buzzer first, though, and I'll call on the person. Press the buzzer. If you look at Donald Trump's first term, you look at what he talked about during the campaign, and you look at some of the appointments he's made, the nominations he's made, how closely aligned would you say Donald Trump is to the Manhattan Institute's agenda on immigration, on crime, on some of the other issues that your organization works on? Jump in.
All right.
Somebody.
Okay.
Just go ahead.
Yeah. So look, I think he's broadly aligned. One of the things that he's been really good at talking about is the importance of public safety and public order. He's really tapped into the frustrations of a lot of Americans, particularly Americans in and around big cities, with respect to how there's been a deterioration in things like subway safety, in things like homeless encampments, with respect to things like retail theft. And he has been absolutely an expert in sort of tapping into those frustrations and really playing up, the sad reality that those things have all gotten worse. And I think on immigration, he's done very much the same thing on DEI. So look, I think it's probably hard to characterize anyone's organization as having, a describable agenda. I think lots of people at the Manhattan Institute differ on some questions, and what we all bring to the table is, a particular sensibility, and that sort of leads us into, the process of thinking and arguing about these things. But I do think that, he exhibited an appreciation for a lot of the things that we've spent our time looking into.
Okay, great. I think my guess is you all agree with that, so I'm not going to ask
I
y'all
think
to
that was
repeat
a great description by
it. Yeah,
Rafael.
it was excellent and very diplomatic, because it's not the favorite topic of people at the Institute necessarily. All right, in the election, one of the aspects of the results that were so striking were Donald Trump's performance in urban areas was better than he'd done previously and better than Republicans had. Some of that is non-white voters, but some of it's ethnic whites who live in cities. So what does that say to you about the prospect going forward that we could see what I've won for? I'm not cheering for the Republican Party, but I'm cheering for a different type of governance, since we've had failed governance by Democratic mayors in a lot of cities for a long time. So what do you see in the election results? Any of you can answer. What do you see in the election results that lead you to believe that perhaps we could see mayoral races won by either Republicans, or in cities with nonpartisan mayoral elections, people who have an agenda that's more like your agenda than what we've seen in cities?
Well, what I've seen is, let me give you one anecdote of how big this shift was. And so I'm also originally from Venezuela, and so the most Venezuelan city in the United States is Doral in Miami-Dade County. Hillary Clinton won that city by 43 points in 2016. Donald Trump just beat Kamala Harris by 23 points in that same city. So there was an over 60-point shift in Doral, which is, by the way, 80% foreign born of the citizen voting eligible population. 80% of them are foreign born. Most of them have college degrees. This is not even like a working class area. So we saw a huge shift in immigrant areas specifically. We're not just talking about, native-born blacks or native-born Hispanics or native-born Asians. We're talking about people who came here legally and became citizens. And so I think that that's what gives me a lot of hope, both for the immigration discussion so that it becomes less polarized, but also for, the cities, because the Democrats, where they have governed locally, have really messed up a lot of these cities. I've seen it firsthand since I moved to New York. Rafael and Renu too, all of us live in the city, and we really want things to improve. And we're not talking about abortion, we're not talking about even taxes, we're talking about picking up the trash, putting the criminals in jail, that the streets don't smell like pot. It's really daily quality of life issues.
Is there some city you'd point to based on the election results and based on the current governance, and perhaps even the existence of potentially strong candidates of the right? Is there a city or two you'd point to say, watch that city? That's a city that's right for a Republican mayor or a more conservative mayor?
I would jump in and say, I would look at cities in the American West, places like Denver, Phoenix, Tucson, and even to a lesser degree, but, still in play, places like Oakland, Los Angeles, San Francisco, all of which have seen, really major shifts, particularly in the last election cycle. And I'll just, quickly give some examples of, support for this proposition. I mean, if you just look at California, right, which is one of the deepest blue states in the country for a really long time. Look at the local election results this last November. I mean, it really is astounding. You have in Los Angeles County, George Gascon, the longtime district attorney who survived a recall attempt in 2021, losing his bid for reelection to Nate Hochman, who ran for DA on an unabashedly law and order campaign platform. Further north in San Francisco, where Chesa Boudin who was a very far left DA and was ousted in 2022, his replacement ran for her first election and won handedly, again on a sort of very traditional law and order platform. That was Brooke Jenkins. Right across the bridge in Oakland, you had Pamela Price and Sheng Tao, the mayor of that city. Sheng Tao was a very sort of, friendly to the defund the police movement, very anti-cop, very anti, traditional criminal justice and law enforcement. And then you had Pamela Price, who was, sort of very far left DA who ran on a platform of not prosecuting certain offenses and not using incarceration as much as possible. Well, they were both recalled successfully. Again, in some of the deepest blue cities in one of the deepest blue states. And then if you look at places like Colorado, Arizona in particular, you're going to see lots of ballot initiatives, including in California, by the way, where Prop 36 passed 70-30, which was astounding to me. Prop 36 reversed in part some of the things that we saw in Proposition 47, which had raised the threshold for felony theft, had decriminalized certain kinds of drug offenses. But if you look at Arizona, you had 4 different ballot propositions, one of which created a new court fee to fund first responders. You had another one, which, by the way, passed with nearly 2/3 of the vote, that makes residents eligible for tax refunds when the government fails to enforce laws, ordinances, and such prohibiting things like illegal camping, loitering, obstructing streets, panhandling, public urination and defecation, and the consumption of alcohol and drugs in public spaces. Now, that's exactly meant to address the kinds of disorder that we're seeing in American cities. If you look at Colorado, you had Prop 128, which was a truth in sentencing regime passing overwhelmingly in a very blue state, which means that people who are convicted of crimes have to serve a minimum of 85% of their sentence, depending on the crime they were convicted of, before they become eligible for release. You have another ballot initiative which appropriated nearly $400 million for police recruitment and retention. You had an amendment to the Constitution in Colorado, which takes bail eligibility off the table for certain first-degree murder cases. I mean, these are all very sort of tried and true, traditionally associated with the right of center law and order initiatives, picking up tons of support in exactly the kind of places that you would have least expected it just 5 years ago. And so the nature of that shift, the fact that all of those jurisdictions include cities that have been dealing with a lot of the kind of disorder that people like Trump and Vance did a really great job of incorporating into the campaign, I think, signals that moderate Republicans or Democrats who are at least willing to break with the left on some of these issues are going to have real shots at political success in urban America.
Yeah. Rainer, what happened in this last election with the Asian American vote? Not monolithic, just like the Hispanic vote's not monolithic. But what happened in cities that suggest there could be a shift there that would benefit Republicans?
Sure. So going off of what Ralph just said, I actually think when you're looking at Asian origin groups, Asian Americans as a collective, you could make the argument that perhaps, sometime in the near future, New York City can come into play. Immediately after the election, much of the response was that, Asians moved toward Trump. When you look at how various Asian majority precincts and Asian neighborhoods in New York voted, the the shift toward Trump away from the Democrats became even starker. So, for example, you had New York's you had various congressional districts in New York move much more toward Trump. The three reasons behind this shift in dissatisfaction, both in New York City and also in places out west, such as San Francisco, is, of course, you have massive Asian, particularly Chinese Americans, have large populations in these areas, dissatisfaction with crime, inflation, the economy. But within areas such as New York City and San Francisco, there's much anger with how Democrats and progressives in these cities have governed with regard to education. New York City is famous for its 8 specialized high schools that many, you take an exam and then you get in, and it's viewed by many Asian families as the first step toward prosperity, toward achieving the American dream. There's resort called Lowell High School in San Francisco. And progressives in the city have tried to do away with merit-based admissions, have said that the schools are much too Asian in New York and in San Francisco. And because of equity reasons, they've tried to implement admissions policies that are currently being contested in court that would openly look to lessen the number of Asians at these schools. So, reporting on this has described that for many Asians in New York City, specifically Chinese Americans, progressive Democratic attacks on the specialized high schools have been a galvanizing moment for them and have contributed to why you're seeing this large racial group, but specifically Chinese Americans, Indian Americans that are concentrated in various neighborhoods out in New York City, but outside of Manhattan, in Queens, in Brooklyn, really moving toward the GOP and toward more moderate Democrats, and finally getting dissatisfied and exercising that dissatisfaction through voting with the Democrats.
Was there a third reason, or did you have the last two
So
variations?
yeah, I guess the three that
Yeah.
I in what I've seen, it's education, crime, and then inflation and the economy.
Got it. Okay. New York City. Apparently, there are other cities in America, but this is the city, right? We had two mayors who were, I would say, regardless of what they called themselves, were more aligned with the Manhattan Institute notion of governance, Rudy Giuliani and then Mike Bloomberg. And they had a lot of terms combined between them. And since then, we've had two mayors, Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams, who have governed more to the left. And quality of life has gone down quite a bit in the city. Adams was seen by some, including the business community that helped elect him, as someone who would govern more conservatively and better, more competently than de Blasio. I predicted before he took office he would be a worse mayor than de Blasio. I believe he has been. Some people might quibble with that. He certainly indicted more than de Blasio, and I'm not sure how much longer he'll be mayor. But my question to you is this. Are the conditions in New York now, you mentioned the potential Republican possibilities here. Trump did better. Donald Trump did better here. Are the conditions ripe for a mayor of New York City being someone, either a Republican or an independent, who would be more in line with the Manhattan Institute? And are there anybody out there you see who might run for mayor who would fit that profile, who could win, like a Giuliani or a Bloomberg?
Well, I would say that the conditions are ripe for a much more moderate person, but I really doubt that Republican will win the next year's election for New York City mayor. Just because, you have a polarized electorate, you're going to have Trump as incumbent president. It's very hard, even given the share of the vote that he got in New York. But I do hope that we will get a much more moderate mayor, at least on the issues of crime and education. The issue, right, is that we have close primaries, meaning only registered Democrats can vote in the Democrat primary. So you get the far left that really gets active, wins the primary, and then nominates a candidate, and whoever the Republicans nominate is likely unelectable. And so that's my concern.
And even harder with ranked choice voting.
Yeah, I think that's
Right.
right. The other thing too is that, I mean, you've seen this in the last couple of mayoral election cycles, that the nature of the debate around those elections has moved further and further away from local issues. The mayor of the city is seen as kind of a national political figure these days, and so they end up getting asked to speak to all of these national issues that don't really have very much to do with governing a place like New York City. But I think Daniel's exactly right. I mean, when you consider the close primaries, when you consider the fact that we have off-year elections, which means that participation goes to the floor, I don't think we're going to see, a sort of strong Republican or sort of, conservative light candidate end up succeeding. What I do hope we see, though, is, a more moderate Democrat who takes issues like public safety, public order, immigration, and public education more seriously. And I think there's a place for that. One of the things that has always frustrated me about the public safety debate in particular is the extent to which it's been politicized. I mean, two of the cities that got it right more than anywhere else in the country in the 1990s and early 2000s was New York and Los Angeles. Now, yeah, New York had Rudy Giuliani, who was a Republican, but it still had a left-leaning city council. You still had a split in Albany, and LA didn't have a Republican resurgence, and yet both of those cities were able to get public safety under control, were able to thrive and grow in really important ways. So, I don't think you have to have a Donald Trump 2.0 win the mayoralty in New York for us to do better.
Yeah, for a time, LA had Dick Riordan as mayor, and he was a business guy and a more moderate, and particularly on law and order. We're going to go to your questions just a minute. We can talk about these issues related to our cities, or we can talk about what's going on in DC right now, or anything really on your mind. So if you'd like to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. I mentioned this at the top. One of my great frustrations is you all believe in free markets. The free market should be replacing decades of failure with something that could succeed, right? And yet we see it in cities, forget some of the cities we've talked about, Baltimore, okay, cities in the South. We just see Democrats who promise the same thing, bowing down to the teachers' unions, failure to deal with law and order, declaring their cities sanctuary cities, okay? What would you say is the explanation for why the market hasn't offered a corrective alternative that voters could vote for? But just take parents and education, okay? Parents overwhelmingly want school choice. Every time a city provides some opportunity for schools to go to magnet schools or charter schools or other alternatives, the parents line up, in droves and droves to say, I want my kid to have this opportunity. Every time there's a crime, and a lot of our crime is non-white on non-white. The community says, please help us. And yet you don't see the corrective very often in the last several decades. So what explains the market's failure to correct?
I just wanted to say that the markets are correcting also in a different mechanism, which is people are moving.
Yeah.
And that's a way of market correction.
Yep.
People move to jurisdictions in which they prefer to live. And
Absolutely.
Liberals do the same, not just conservatives. And so that's why you have this massive geographic polarization today in the US, because you get, more left-wing individuals moving to places that are generally more left-wing, and you get more right-wing individuals moving to places that are more right-wing. And now you're seeing people move for educational choice. You're seeing people move for safety, like we've had throughout history. But the markets did correct this last election. You saw a huge shift rightward, especially in cities, especially in democratic states. New York is the state that shifted right the most between 2020 and 2024. And so the question is, how bad does it have to get before the shift is enough to get 50% plus of the population, right? Because you saw this huge shift in New York in 4 years, despite the bleeding of population that likely would have voted right. Right? So that is impressive.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point.
Go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's a really great point. I mean, New York City's lost between 5 and 6% of its population since 2020. A lot of that was a function of dissatisfaction with exactly the kind of issues that, have been frustrating urban residents for, the last decade plus. In terms of, making it easier for some alternative political path. I mean, I think, the fact that it's just easier for people to move, is part of the explanation. But I also think, and, this plays into a lot of the work that Rainey has done, the race issue still looms heavy. Why is it that you see Democrats continue to get away with what are clearly ineffective and in some cases really unpopular policies? Well, I think, a lot of people are afraid to stand up and push back against something where there's a lot of momentum behind it. I mean, 2020 was an incredible year for really bad criminal justice policies, and not just getting proposed, not just getting a hearing, but getting fast-tracked and put into place. In the year after George Floyd was killed in Minnesota, I think it was like 30 states passed like 140 different police and criminal justice reform bills just in that one year. That's an insane amount of movement. And so one of the things that Democrats have been really good at doing, particularly in American cities, is leveraging the race issue to, kind of threaten voters, really, right? I mean, but also, tie that to, their effort to build the national brand of for Republicans in the minds of voters. And, ultimately, even if, an urban American voter agrees with a more conservative candidate on a particular issue, even one that means a lot to them, I think it ultimately is hard for them to get past all of the other stuff.
I'll also
Go ahead. Yeah,
I'd
go ahead,
also
Rainey.
just very quickly add that people are moving with their feet, but like Ralph just said, the race issue has been so off-putting to different ethnic minority groups throughout these cities, particularly New York City, that we've seen groups that have not engaged in political activism before, that have been characterized as typically low propensity voters, turn out in large droves. Chinese Americans, Korean Americans, Vietnamese Americans in New York City and San Francisco are now politically active in a way that they weren't, you could argue weren't a decade ago. And this is a direct result of Democratic policies on education, for example, that are racially discriminatory towards, them and their children. And so they're finally stepping up and saying, we want to, we're going to use our voice at the ballot box to sort of put this to rest. So I think people are moving away, but also you have voters that are now galvanized in a way that they weren't before.
Are there one or two cities in America today that are being governed along the lines of what the Manhattan Institute likes to see that you can name?
I'd
Hard
say
to say.
That's a good question.
I would say
The most Republican city is Miami in a way, right? It's the only big city with a Republican mayor. I think it has a lot of problems, but it's also the city that seems to be thriving the most.
I think you could also make an argument for Dallas, Texas, as
That's
having
what I was
many
going to say.
Good
policies
point.
that are in line with, what the Manhattan Institute advocates for.
And their mayor, I think, just changed parties, if I'm not mistaken, relatively recently to the Republicans. So yeah, I would say Dallas would have been the example that I cited as well.
Mayor Suarez in Miami is a very charismatic guy, very, very energetic about quality of life issues. If I'm not mistaken, I should know this. It's a relatively weak mayor, right, in Miami, like Los Angeles. It's not quite like being like the PR person. There is some governance, but it's not as strong as some mayors are, and so it's hard to know.
Yeah, the county
That's,
matters more,
yeah.
in the Miami-Dade County, but I'm pretty sure that the county person will be flipped soon as well.
Yeah. Last question is there somebody out there who you can name who you think will run for mayor of some big city somewhere that you think we should keep an eye on? Who you think would be good?
Well, I don't know if he'll necessarily run for mayor in New York, but Representative Richie Torres has been getting a
Yeah.
lot of attention, and he wants to. It seems as though he's more interested in challenging Kathy Hochul for the governorship.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he's a progressive from the Bronx, but is very much in line in terms of merit-based admissions,
Yeah.
hard crime policies. So he's one thought that comes to mind.
Yeah. And he's appeared on Two-Way and we think he's a super interesting guy. And of course, as you all know, and lots of people on here know, in New York, the governor has a lot of influence over the city. So even if he does run for governor, if he wins, I think he'd be a force for change in Gotham City as well as in the state. All right, let's bring folks in. As always, tell us where you are and what's on your mind. And grateful to everybody for joining. All right. Another name I'm not going to risk mispronouncing. Ram or Ram?
Ram, it's Ram.
Ram, welcome in. Where are you tonight? What's on your mind? Again, you can ask
Well,
these geniuses from the Manhattan Institute anything you want, or you can ask me a question, or just make a statement, or offer your favorite holiday recipe, whatever you wish.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. My name is Ram, and I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, a fairly liberal state. I'm a Dan Democrat, right? I'm a Dan Turin Democrat, but over the last two cycles, I've been so disgusted by what the Democratic Party has gone, and I just couldn't vote for Kamala this season, and I voted for Nikki Haley. I wrote in Nikki Haley. So the question I have for you is, Yesterday, I think Vivek read the 1,527 pages and summarized the contents of the continuing resolution. Are you aware of any media or press outlet summarizing the contents and putting it out in that fashion before Vivek did it? I mean, isn't it the responsibility of the press to kind of document what the exact bill contains rather than just the fight between them? And Vivek was the first, and maybe there were other people who did it, but Vivek was the first guy who, I mean, from that X post, I could understand exactly what was in that bill. So are you aware of any other press who did that?
Yeah, so great question. This has been one of my annoyances my entire career. It's hard to do, right? And a lot of the press who covers Capitol Hill are political reporters, right? And a lot of the provisions in these major bills are substantive. So if I ran a big newsroom, I'd say, okay, where are my healthcare reporters? Because I want them to analyze the healthcare section. Where are my Pentagon reporters? I want them to analyze that. And even if you did that, which nobody does, you'd have some things that kind of cross over. Like you could be an expert on the Pentagon, but that doesn't necessarily mean you know how to read the bill to understand how to evaluate it. In addition, legislative language is kind of gobbledygooky. So you need to not only be an expert in healthcare policy, but in legislative ease. And then you need to organize it all to present it. In this age, in the digital age, if I were the Washington Post, which has thousands of reporters or whatever, I'd set up a live feed and I'd do it as like a series of little like vignettes. And I'd say, okay, who's ready to analyze page 50 through 75? And have them sit there and go on camera and say this and this and this. It's very difficult to do. What you see is kind of political reporter ease analysis of the major provisions. Okay. So you're right, it should happen. This makes it worse, not better. The members don't know what's in it, right? Except for a few drafters, and even then they're drafting different sections. Even the members, and a lot of conservatives complain they're asking us to vote on a bill we haven't read. Well,
it's usually the staff who knows. It's not really the members. It's the staff. Most people,
but even the staff. You're right. But even the staff don't. So what you're asking for is something that should be done. Some people have used AI to try to figure it out, but it's kind of a problem. The guideline, a principle of 72 hours is great, but again, the problem is so much of the coverage is from political reporters. They don't spend their 72 hours trying to explain to the American public what's in the bill. They spend the 72 hours, covering the politics of it. Musk. And again, I've criticized him now 3 straight episodes for this. Noah, if you can keep watching because the vote's going on now. So if you could let us know when the vote ends, what the total is. Musk used his platform to call out some things that were right and I think would outrage a lot of people. But then he did a bunch of lies. He said the pay raise was much higher than it was for Congress. I'm very disappointed in him that he did that because he has this huge platform. And he could hire 50 people or 500 people to read it. So you're absolutely right. It should happen. Even if you're a giant consumer of news, it's hard to get access to that. I will say, if you're a citizen, the bill is posted. You can read it yourself, and probably do better than most political reporters would.
So just to follow up. So what I've heard is Doge. This is the definition of Doge. I mean, the whole point. They say Doge is about being transparent, and in the future, in the next year and years going forward, every bill that is put before Congress, there would be a summary like this so that everyone knows what is going in, and then there is real-time feedback. This is like real-time democratic feedback that is going back. If you saw yesterday, right, it was about to be voted. In fact, when I heard your morning meeting yesterday, I don't think there was a lot of debate or discussion about the CR not being voted on. And then it all flipped when Vivek put it in. And Musk said no one should vote for it. They should get primaried and all of that. And then the entire thing changed because a lot of people commented and it looked like MAGA and the public were against it. And the whole thing flipped. So is this real-time democracy on show here?
Yes, is messy. Democracy is messy, but yeah, absolutely. And I think there's more good than bad in what happened, because it did show grassroots ability to say, let's change up the way this is going. But like I said, his ability to use his platform and his influence to help kill the bill through lies, I'm not a big fan of that.
I
Not a
agree
big
with that.
fan of that.
I agree
I
with
think
that.
it's
By the
I
way,
think it sets
Pat,
a dangerous precedent.
yeah,
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, so this is first time, obviously, first time speaker, but I watched your show, and you, Sean, and Dan are just great. I mean, beautiful platform, great
I
platform.
appreciate that. How many of your friends have you recommended watch?
My kids and at least a couple of my close friends.
Not enough. Not enough. Please bring more people. Thank you for joining. Have a great holiday. Come back regularly. Very grateful to you. Have any of you ever worked on Capitol Hill?
I
Oh no.
interned when I was younger.
Intern. If you could wave a wand and change one thing about Congress, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Uh, well, I would, I'm not sure if it's about Congress, but generally about the lawmaking process and regulatory process. I would force every major regulation that the executive branch issues to be voted on by Congress.
Anybody else?
I would say two things. One is term limits, and the other is making it so that no regulation can be criminally enforceable without a congressional vote. One of the things that a lot of people don't know, when I first started working in this space, I was kind of, focusing more on reform initiatives, is that about 98% of federal criminal law is regulatory in nature, which means it was never subjected to a congressional vote. And that shocks a lot of people who are sort of familiar with the Schoolhouse Rock version of, how law gets made. But in reality, Congress will just pass some, grant of rulemaking authority, and then have some catch-all provision where they say any rule promulgated pursuant to this enactment shall be enforced as a misdemeanor or a felony. And then, the Department of Agriculture or whoever was authorized to make rules starts making rules, not realizing that every time they put pen to paper, they're creating a criminal offense.
Just now, the IRS is threatening to put in prison small business owners who don't report ownership over their businesses, and it's all executive without Congress.
That's right.
Yep. Raina, what would you change about Congress if you magically could?
Oh, I was going to say term limits as well.
Yeah, term limits. All right. Cynthia, come on in. Tell folks where you are who don't know what's on your mind, please.
I'm in Sykesville, Maryland, the coolest small town in America, 1 square mile of town. And I am a Republican, and I'm really loving your show tonight. I think these 3 guys are really wonderful. It's great to hear their ideas and their synopsis. And I just have a quick suggestion. You had asked yesterday, I think it was yesterday, the day before, Mark, that we could make a suggestion about the show.
Yes, ma'am.
And kind of dovetailing about what we've been talking about tonight, my suggestion is that you have a show that's called Media Matters, and you invite some really some other people that who are experts in the media, and maybe some of the people that you've been on their show yourself, like maybe Greta Van Susteren, for whom I have a lot of respect, or Megyn Kelly. And I would also like to have a show called Finance Matters and Governance Matters. So, and then find people who have a variety of opinions and backgrounds, but who speak to those matters substantively. That would be my suggestion.
Those are all great suggestions, and I'll say, without minimizing them, in fact, just the opposite. Those are all things we're talking about and considering, and just you wait for 2025. We're going to have a lot more programs right along the lines you want. I think if we had an entire 24-hour schedule just about the media, there'd be great interest in that. We just need to figure out how to make that happen. Thank you for that. How did you find out about Two-Way?
Back in July, I started watching. I can't remember exactly how I found it out, but I have become almost every day, both morning and evening fan.
Awesome.
I have been circulating some of the best shows to my friends, people that are amazing insight. and it's been very much helpful hearing people from the other side. I really loved your guest. I think it was last night, whose name I didn't catch, who was saying about that many people who are conservative listen to a variety of platforms, and people who have more liberal views tend to only listen to people in their own spaces. And so I feel challenged to keep looking out for other platforms as well.
Great. Cynthia, thank you for coming. Come back regularly. You said you're from Pikesville, Maryland, right?
Sykesville.
Oh, Tikesville.
Sykesville, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. All right. Charles King, come on in. Tell folks where you are who don't know what's on your mind, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm in the Chicago suburbs. Appreciate the opportunity.
Great to have you here. Thank you for joining.
Quick question about what you said about Musk and the lies. I don't know what he said about the bill or exactly what he was pointing out. I do understand that he ran it through the Twitter AI. I'm curious, really quickly, what specifically do you have in mind when you kind of when you pointed to lies?
There's a bunch of stories today. I'll tell you the one I already cited. He claimed that there was going to be a 40% pay raise for Congress in the bill, some number like that, and that wasn't close to accurate. And that was one of the big provisions that caused a populist uprising against the measure. So that was one, but there are others.
Okay, all right. Well, I don't know what he said, so appreciate that.
Yeah.
In terms of things to change about Congress, how about the concept of blind trusts? Something to maybe blunt the rampant, seemingly insider trading that seems to go on. I don't know if there's problems with blind trusts or other kind of financial instruments or mechanisms, but if there are, I'd love to hear what they are, because it just seems like kind of a common sense thing that legislators should be subject to.
Yeah, there's a bipartisan movement for that, and trying to get them to not be able to play the stock market. And we'll see if Trump decides he wants to do it. I suspect it could well pass, and that could be something that got bipartisan support.
Yeah, I don't hear much about that, so that's great to hear if that truly is in the works.
Yeah. Charles, how far do you live from downtown Chicago?
Well, about 40 miles probably. I'm way out there. I'm up in Lake County.
Yeah.
We're in Lake County.
Is southwest corner, I'll
Okay.
say.
All right.
Near Barrington.
Do you pay much attention to the governance of Chicago, or doesn't
not as much as maybe I should.
Yeah.
It's a different world down there than where I am out in the burbs up here.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Probably have everything you need right where you are.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have to metro into the city, so I do get a taste of it a few times a week, which is always interesting.
Thank you for joining. We appreciate it. All right, let's bring back one of our favorite members of the community, former Illinois Congressman Dan Lipinski. Congressman, welcome in. What's on your mind, sir?
Well, you're asking what should be done to Congress. We need to get back to what they used to call regular order, where committees actually would consider legislation, debate it, amend it. You wouldn't have the problems that you ran into with this CR. And it gives much more transparency. It gives members an opportunity to have their voices heard early in the process. I just completed a project at the Hoover Institution where we recommended specific changes to House rules. And if anyone wants to see that, they can go to the Hoover Institution website, the Center for Revitalizing American Institutions. And these are changes that, sort of common sense change to the House rules that would open up the process, because a lot of members are very frustrated that they don't really have a say. I mean, you heard that on the CR. I mean, even the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, was complaining he didn't have a say in this. And members of Congress need to start being part of the legislative process, or else we don't really have a representative democracy. We're not, if our representatives are not being heard, that is a terrible way to be making laws.
Congressman Lipinski, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How would it be possible to change the House rules or on the Senate rules such that bills can be brought forth to a vote without the need of the Speaker or the majority party even supporting it? Because I feel like a lot of bipartisan legislation isn't able to be put for a vote because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that. There are so many problems that, as part of the House Problem Solvers Caucus, a legislation that we had on healthcare, on immigration, that the Speaker just did not want. So if the Speaker doesn't want a bill to come to the floor, it doesn't happen. And there's a number of different ways to do that, make the process easier. On the discharge petition, you can give say to committees, if you actually go through a process of debating a piece of legislation, you have it for open amendment before the committee, that it's guaranteed to come to the House floor, to tell committees, hey, you do your work, and that bill will come to the floor, get to debate it there, and have a chance to pass it. And the big problem right now is everything's run through the party leadership on both sides, and members have given up this power to their leaders, who tell them, well, you need to give me all the power, or else I can't get our agenda done. Well, that's not the way that this is supposed to work. And members are supposed to be listening to their constituents, be part of the process, and there are changes that can be made. Again, you look at the recommendations that we made, and I'm going to continue pushing for some of these changes, like I was when I was there in the House.
Congressman, thank you. Appreciate it. Very, very interesting stuff. All right. We're going to have to close up. We're still waiting for the vote count. But one of you tell everybody, if they're interested in the work of the Institute, you guys have a website. I'm guessing.
Mark, I'm saying that looks like the bill failed.
Yeah. Do you know how many votes it got? How many? I'm curious how many
30,
Democrats voted for it.
More than 30 Republicans voted no.
And how many Democrats
looks like
voted yes?
Like two.
Two. Yeah. So they got a challenge.
I'm looking at. Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. All right. Why don't you tell everybody, if they're interested in Manhattan Institute, where can they learn more?
You can go to manhattan.institute. Very, very easy. And I would also recommend that if you're just interested in this kind of content, you should check out our flagship publication, City Journal, which you can get to at city-journal.org.
Awesome. And I'm going to put all that in my Substack and tweet it out. So if you follow me one of those two places, you'll be able to get it, and I'll put everybody's handle in as well. Thanks to all three of you, and to the Manhattan Institute for coming on tonight and for sharing all of that. And we look forward to having you and your colleagues back in the new year. Grateful to everybody for watching. This program's not on until January 6th. Again, Sean Dan and I will be back tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. But this is the last episode of Two Way Tonight for the year. I couldn't be more grateful to everybody for the community that's already been built and what we're going to do together next year. We'll be with you if there's breaking news between now and the 6th that warrants it. But otherwise, we'll see you on January 6th. Wishing everybody who only watches this show, because there are some people who only watch this show, very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Grateful, as I said, for your participation in Two Way. We have a lot in store for you for 2025, and we're eager to have you be part of it. Again, thanks to you three for coming on and sharing your expertise. These three, I know you think probably these are the three most impressive people at the Manhattan Institute.
Not even close.
They probably are. They probably are, but they have a lot of super impressive colleagues. So I recommend you go to the website. And City Journal is the flagship publication, but they publish so many great studies and events and conversations. I couldn't recommend more. If you're interested, you don't have to share all their ideological views. If you're interested in fresh ideas and innovative thinking to try to make America better, you're going to learn a lot if you look at their stuff. So thanks to the three of you. I wish you three happy holidays, and I hope you'll come back soon.
Merry
Same to you,
Christmas.
absolutely.
Bye.
Good night. See you at 9 a.m. Eastern.
Bye, everyone.